Welcome to Gather In, where you'll hear stories of conversion to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you have an interesting story to tell, please go to our Instagram page or send us an email to gatherin@proton.me. I'm your host, Murray Ceff. Welcome everybody to the Gather In podcast for this week. We are joined today by Oleg Lewinski from Ballarat in Victoria in Australia. Oleg is an old friend of mine. We've known each other for many years. I've been trying to think when it was, Oleg, that we first met, and I can't remember.
Neither can I.
So it was a long time ago. But
2 or 3 decades.
2 or 3 decades? Gee, it could be that long.
Well, I've been in the church 40 years. Yes, 40 years Wednesday. No, tomorrow.
Yeah?
Yep.
So we've both been in the church and in the same state for quite a bit of time, but with the growth of the church and boundary changes and additional stakes being formed, we've ended up in different stakes, even though our wards, my home ward of Geelong and your home ward of Ballarat, actually border each other. So we're now in different stakes. And for quite a while, I was a high councilman in our stake responsible for Ballarat ward. And that was the time when I got to know most people in Ballarat ward that I know now. Some of those older faces have gone, as we all eventually do. Yeah. So, one of the things I'm doing, wanting to do is capture all these conversion stories before people pass on to the other side of the veil, because it's a lot easier to record those stories now than later.
Yes.
And you have a birthday coming up on Wednesday, I believe.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's the anniversary tomorrow of my baptism. 40 years ago.
So you were baptized the day before your birthday?
Yes.
Back in 1983.
That's right.
So, can we just go back in time a little bit now?
Okay. As far as you like.
Well, I actually want to we had a little bit of a chat earlier today about your history, and it's very interesting. And in some ways, not unlike mine. But I think oftentimes conversion to the church and to the gospel and to Jesus Christ, and those things can all happen, at different times perhaps. But oftentimes it starts in our childhood and can stem from our upbringing. And so I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your upbringing and where you were born, and maybe tell us about the origins of the surname, and your first name, actually, because that's obviously not the typical Aussie surname. It's not an Anglo-Saxon name. So tell us a little bit about your history, going right back to when you were born.
Well, okay. I was born in Germany, post-war, and actually, if I count back 9 months from my birth, I was conceived as probably a celebration of liberation for my parents, who had been incarcerated by the Germans.
Right.
In a labor camp.
Okay.
They had a bit of time. My older brother was born in Poland under German occupation there, while Mum was working for the Germans. This was before they didn't need her skills anymore, and shipped her and my family into a labor camp in Germany. So my father died when I was 2, largely from the treatment he received in the Soviet prison. Anyway, so Mum wanted to get away from Europe as far as possible. After all, she was born in Russia before the revolution, so she had to escape the Bolsheviks to Poland. And I think she changed her name with her mother. And there was a lot of changed names. So Lewinski is a conjured name. I've got no idea what our name was. Yes, because she was working for the French after the war, and they were happy to help her change her ID to avoid being repatriated to Russia, which would have spelled a complete, absolute doom for her and her family. She had a dying husband and 2 little children on her hands, so she was desperate to avoid being in Russian hands again.
Yeah.
So, age of 3, we shipped out to Australia and spent 10 years in migrant camps from 49 to 59.
Okay.
Before finally Mum was naturalised and got a job as a teacher in Nil, Western Victoria.
Oh, okay.
We were there a couple of years and then moved to Horsham.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So
do you want more of that?
Just one interesting thing, Oleg. I said we had a few similar things happening. Your family are from Russia. My family are also from Russia. Well, on my father's side. That's where the name Ceff comes from. It's the end of a longer Russian name, Shikan Ceff.
Okay.
So there you go. There's something in common.
Mum was born in Ukraine. Yes, my mother's born in Ukraine, so doubtless I've got some distant relatives there in all that conflict and turmoil now. So I have no idea what who my long-term, distant relatives are.
Yeah.
And all I can't get back beyond my mother in my family history.
Right. Yeah, it's difficult. I've luckily been able to go back several generations, so I've probably done a little bit better. My father was born in Australia, and I was obviously born in Australia as well. So, okay, so you found yourself here in Australia with your mother, your brother?
Yes.
But
there was also a sister. My mother adopted a teenage girl during the war in Poland. She came out with us and took our name. She had a tragic life, and we lost touch with her when she grew up and left, and eventually tracked her down in her early 70s, and she was in a nursing home for Huntington's chorea sufferers.
Okay.
It's a dreadful disease. Do you know anything about it?
No, I don't actually. No, I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it. You
don't know you've got it until you're an adult, basically, and by that time you've passed it on to your children.
Oh, okay.
So that's what happened to her and her children.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So here you were in Australia, a young family with so a single mother, a widowed mother. Your father had died before you came out here.
Yes. Yes.
And you were growing up in country Victoria, in Nil.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, in Benalla.
Sorry?
In the migrant camp. We were in migrant camp Benalla till 59 and then moved to Nil.
Yeah.
So the best part of my childhood was on the Broken River in Benalla. Like a very thin style.
Okay. And so how was your childhood?
Great. Like I said, we lived on the edge of town near the river.
Yeah.
And that was our playground. And I had this cosmopolitan bunch of friends, Poles and Russians and Latvians and Estonians. We were called Balts. The Italians and Greeks were called the Balts, but we were called Balts because we came from around the Baltic Sea.
Right. Okay.
And for us, it was a good time, but for our parents, it was dreadful. My mother was stuck there for 10 years trying to get out.
Yeah.
Trying to get a home. It wasn't because there was it was like a ghetto almost.
Yeah.
Drunken parties and weekends, and us kids were unsupervised and got into all sorts of mischief. Not a happy time for my mother. Great for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah. So you went through school. Where did you attend school?
Well, started Benalla, my first year in high school, Benalla, and then Nil the next 2 years, and then they decided Mum's skills as a French teacher was better served in the bigger school, so they moved her to Horsham, and that's where we stayed until I left school.
Okay, so you graduated from high school in Horsham?
Well, I would say graduated. I wasn't a student at all. My mother kept pushing me. I failed year 11 and I got through after the second try, failed year 12. And Mum wanted me to do it again. So I was very malleable. I wasn't very rebellious at all. So I just kept being prodded along, pushed along, and getting worse and worse. And after I failed the second time, she wanted me to do it again. This time I put my foot down and said, that's enough, I've had it. I'm getting out of here. So I left and moved to Melbourne.
Okay.
And started as a door-to-door salesman, and then finally got a job in a workshop, Country Roads Board workshop as a clerk.
Okay.
And then library attendant in the city. And then I left all that and became an actor. Odd jobs.
I knew you had some experience in theatre or on screen.
Yes. And then the late Jack Charles was a friend of mine. We lived together, worked together.
Okay.
Yeah.
And something I haven't asked you about your growing up years. Were you attending church, any sort of church through your childhood?
No. When we were in Nil, the Methodists got hold of us because we had no church. While we were in the migrant camp, we'd go to Melbourne for our holidays, so I'd see a Russian church maybe once or twice a year.
Yeah.
And that was Russian Orthodox, which I was brought up as. In Nil, the Methodists got hold of us, and then in Horsham, the Presbyterians in Nil and the Methodists in Horsham. Eventually, Mum tried the Church of England and finally wound up with the Salvation Army.
Okay. So
that was after I'd left Horsham.
Okay, so I'm guessing you probably wouldn't describe your family as deeply religious, but slightly religious. No. Slightly religious?
No. My mother was. She said in the concentration camp with the Soviets at beginning of the war in Poland. She said she found God in prison.
Yeah.
There's actually a fascinating correlation between her mother, herself, and myself in a courtroom scene. My grandmother was almost condemned to death during the revolution, and it was only because one of the tribunal that was judging her recognized there's a nurse that looked after him when he was a wounded soldier, that she got out of that one. And in that situation, when she's practically facing a firing squad, you hear the shot reverberating outside in the courtyard, she felt this peace go through her, and a calmness, and no some sort of a light of hope. And at the same time, my mother, during the Second World War, was sentenced to 10 years in the Arctic, some Russian gulag in the Arctic, just before the Germans attacked Russia.
Right.
And she said, asked her prosecutor, how long do you think I'll last? And he said, I'll give it 2 years, maybe at the most. And she said, we don't know. She said she felt this peace go through her. And no, there's a light in the tunnel, and this isn't going to happen. And as it was, she was on the train being shipped to Russia, was bombed by a German plane. And she ran back towards the German lines and escaped. And my father miraculously escaped as well. And then there was I in the Paris courtroom. It wasn't facing death, but I was facing the loss of my custody of my boy.
Yeah.
And seemed everything was against me. The lawyers, the money, they had the money, the power, everything. And darkness was sort of gathering around me. And at that moment, a light came on somewhere in my soul. And I seemed to be assured that everything would be okay. And it was. And I did win the court case, and I came home with my son.
Okay. Can we just backtrack a little bit there, Oleg?
Sure. Yes.
Can you tell us a story about how you why and how you ended up in Paris with the custody of your son.
Well, my first wife, Bridget, was French, and we were living in South Gippsland, idyllic little paradise.
Yeah.
But our marriage was souring. We had a little boy, and the marriage wasn't going well. It was souring, actually. And along came this German backpacker.
Yeah.
Now, all this sort of chance thing, looking back, it almost seemed as if it was deliberate. It happened deliberately to set me on my path, my spiritual path.
Yeah.
He'd been working in some mine in Western Australia, quit his job, had earned some money, was lazing on a beach in Albany, and decided to head for Melbourne. Got a lift, which took him to Melbourne in a couple of days. Zoom. Didn't like it, so he got on the highway to head along the coast to Sydney, and was picked up by the boyfriend of a girl who just moved in with us, who brought him over hill and day to our doorstep. And it was near Christmas. I said, make yourself at home. We've got a little orchard there by the creek. Set your tent up, use our facilities. And and there he was.
Oops, you've disappeared, Oleg.
That's right. That was just my wife trying to call me.
Oh, okay.
Hang on. I'll tell my son to call and not disturb us.
Okay.
Josh.
It's very interesting, huh?
All right. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Organized. Yes. Okay. So, anyway, so they paired off and decided to leave the country and go through Asia and back to France.
Oh, hang on 2 seconds, yeah. Oleg. I think we missed something there. Who paired off?
The German backpacker and my wife.
The German backpacker took off with your wife?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So you will now have second thoughts about ever allowing a German backpacker into your life. No offense to any backpackers.
No, it's okay. But so I found myself in the hippie culture thing, looking for answers. That was beginning my spiritual journey, and I was finding things were just working for me. I felt very blessed in my tragic situation. I found myself in North Queensland, not far from where you are, in the Atherton Tablelands.
Yeah.
I met this guy at a party and mentioned that I was in the area, and he said, "Oh, I'm going away for a while. Do you mind looking after my house for me? It's in the rainforest out there." And he drew me a map. And so next day I found this little Shangri-La cottage in the beautiful rainforest, setting above a creek, and I never saw him again. It was there, lock, stock, kitchen, clothing, books, meditation. It was built for meditation, this little house, in a commune called Zen Colony. And I was there for 3.5 months until one of his ex-girlfriends turned up, and it seemed right that I should move on and she should take over. And that's when I headed south, headed for home, and got waylaid at Nimbin. And there I got into Buddhism.
Oh, okay.
So that's a very nutshell story. There's so much in there that very entertaining stories throughout all.
So would have you called yourself a Buddhist for a period of time in your life? About Buddhism?
I started with this Buddhist meditation center thing. And once I got into Buddhism, I said, if this is Buddhism, I've been a Buddhist all my life. The precepts were, just lovely, and it was very gentle faith. And so I continued with them, and eventually we got down to near Wiseman's Ferry on the Hawkesbury. They bought a piece of land in the Darug National.
Yeah.
and they set up this monastery. So I and four others. There was Brian, Debbie, myself, we were the lay people, and there was Ilse Lederman, the meditation teacher, and Prakantapala, the Buddhist monk. The five of us started this monastery, lay community place called Wat Buddha Dhamma. And I was there for 3.5 months when I got a message from Bridget, my wife. She'd landed in Perth with our son.
Yeah.
And wanted me to come over. So I was living for my keep. I had no money.
Yeah.
No money. Not even unemployed. No dole, no nothing. I was working for my keep.
Yeah.
And she sent me the money for the bus fare. And knowing that I'd be dependent on it, I kept the money and hitched from Sydney to Perth. And it was door-to-door service all the way. Like I said, things just happened to fall my way wherever I went. And I was there for 6 weeks or so, and I couldn't see any future at all. She was still hoping that her partner was going to follow her back to Australia, which didn't happen. So she took off and joined him in Israel. And I headed back east, not knowing where I was going to go, but wound up in my mother's home. And it seemed right that I should stay there.
Yeah.
And 6 months later, I heard that Bridget had died.
Okay.
And it was, and then I had to get my son back from Paris.
Okay, so she died in Paris.
Yes.
So she would have been quite young when she died.
27. It was tragic. She picked up a bug in Indonesia or somewhere on the way through Asia.
Yeah.
And was treated for it when she got to Paris initially, and it apparently was cured, but it was dormant. It was dormant in the system. And then when she left Australia again later on and was traveling through Yugoslavia somewhere, it broke out again. It was like a little Pac-Man eating away inside her. And when they got her to a hospital in Austria, it was in the liver. And the mother arrived and they said, it's pretty hopeless. She said, she rang the French and they said, we've got better surgeons, better equipment. And she had flown to Paris. It was middle of winter. It must have cost a fortune to fly her through, unconscious in a sort of operating situation. And they just kept chasing the infection until it got to the eyes. And the mother said, no, that's it. Forget it. Stop. And she died the next day. Terrible, horrible. I knew nothing about it until it was all over.
Yeah, well, that's quite tragic. So when she passed away, your son was there with her.
Yes.
And then you had to go to Paris to get custody of your son, so you could bring him back to Australia.
Yes, and I was, I guess, again, I say, barefoot, long-haired, no money, no passport, nothing, and within a week, I was over there with court order giving me sole custody, with a return ticket for my son, with some money as well, and instructions to grab the kid and run like hell back to the airport before they get the litigation going. But that didn't happen, and I was stuck there for 8 months, living on the charity of strangers.
Wow.
Against all odds. Everybody's saying, no, you've got no hope. They've got the money, they've got the power, their contacts and everything. No. With God, everything is possible.
Yeah.
And I had that revelation before I left, that your son will be returned to you as long as you do nothing that you'll be ashamed of or feel guilty about. And I understood that to love my enemy and turn the other cheek and all that goody Bible stuff.
Yeah.
And I discovered there's actual power in virtue.
Yeah.
Actual power in virtue.
Yeah.
My enemies were terrified of me. I wouldn't hurt a fly. They just couldn't get me out.
So in this time that you found yourself in Paris fighting for custody of your son, you had to learn to speak French at the time to be able to do that, or?
Sorry?
You had to learn to speak French at the time to be able to do that?
I had school French, I think being Russian, we're pretty good at picking up languages. I think we're known for that. My
Yeah.
mother was a linguist, so
Okay.
I grew up in a migrant camp, picking up Russian, French, Polish, not French, but learning French at school, and with a French wife, mixing with French society. I picked up a bit here and there.
Yeah.
But once I had got to Paris and I had to understand my son, because by the time I got to him, his English was gone. He was speaking French.
Yeah.
And having to understand lawyers and judges and policemen, I picked it up very, very quickly, very quickly.
Okay.
And there was, like, between court sessions, there would be about 6 weeks. Every time there was some sort of court appearance, all right, come back in 6 weeks' time. Next session, 6 weeks' time.
Yeah.
So it took forever. And then when I won the first case, they appealed. And so the ball got rolling again.
Oh, no.
And I realized in the end that the strategy was to try and dry me out, because they knew I had a return ticket and I had no money.
Yeah.
And the law was on my side. I didn't know that. The law was on my side.
Yeah.
The judges were always very sympathetic, always very kind, and yeah. But I kept turning up like a bad penny.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So maybe we should fast forward a little bit at this stage and just get closer to the time where you somehow became a member of the church. Where were you when this happened?
Well, I came with Horsham. I brought my boy back to Horsham, to my mother's place.
Yeah.
And by this time, I knew I had a pretty strong testimony that I was a child of God, much loved, and
Oh.
obviously she hadn't got the message.
Sorry,
yes.
you just dropped out for a second there.
Sorry.
Yeah. So can you just backtrack a bit? You found out you were a child of God, much loved, and
yeah. And I had a faith, and I was looking for somewhere to share it with someone, to people of the same, makeups, same ideas.
Yeah.
So I went around checking out churches, the Buddhist, I've given up on the Buddhists, because by this time I was pretty fixed on God. And I tried the Jehovah's Witnesses. I looked at any church, and nowhere could I find comfortable. Yeah, no, I wasn't comfortable anywhere. They were all seemed to be artificial, like I say, man-made.
Yeah.
And eventually I gave up. No, I'll just do my own thing. I'll carry on. I had good friends who respected my feelings, and actually I was in some sort of held in some awe because of my exploits in Paris and what I'd gone through. And anyway, so I gave up on looking for like-minded Christians, and then these missionaries turned up. This was 1980, not that long after I came back from Paris.
Okay, so at some stage you sort of drifted from Buddhism towards Christianity.
Yes, that happened in Paris.
Okay.
That happened in Paris.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so by the time the two Latter-day Saint missionaries arrived on your door, you had a testimony that God loved you.
Yes.
And was
definitely
interested in your life.
Yes, and I knew that I had to try and do my best to live by his rules.
Okay.
To keep him happy.
Okay.
so to speak. Yeah. If I kept him happy, he'd keep me happy.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty good arrangement.
Yes.
So tell us about the young missionaries who knocked on your door.
Elder Whitaker and Elder Taylor. I was impressed with them because Elder Taylor had a strong speech impediment.
Yeah.
He was the main speaker. He struggled to talk, and yet he battled on with his disability, and that was impressive. And I had a lot of exposure to them. They kept coming back. I never told them to go away and don't come back. And also, any of my friends that accepted an appointment with them would invite me to come be with them because they felt secure with me, because I was like some sort of a guru to them. They felt safe with my presence. So I got plenty of exposure to these missionaries. And eventually they were going to bring in another couple of missionaries and a film and a big presentation. And it never happened. They were called away. So that was the end of them. Okay, good riddance, more or less. And on I go with my little life. And then 3 years later, in 83, here they were, two more, Elder Munson and Swenson. One tall blonde, and I think they came from Arizona. One from Arizona, I forget where that one came, probably Utah. And I was coming from the back of the house, and here was Mum fending off these two tall young men. No, I already got the Book of Mormon. No, my house has been blessed already. No. And then they kept pushing in, but. I said, hey, guys, leave her alone. Come and talk to me. So Mum escaped into the house, and I sat him under the apricot tree down the back. It was a hot summer's day, not long before my birthday.
Yeah.
And they brought out their little, some kind of folder, demonstrate, I don't know, scriptures, things, I don't know what else. I said, here we go again. But this time, something deep inside disturbed me. And at the time, I thought it was a big question. Could there possibly be something in what they're saying? Any truth there? And it suddenly became the most important thing in my life to find out.
Yeah.
And they said, well, you've got to ask God. And even though I had strong faith, I'd never prayed. Okay. So that night when Mum and Akan were asleep, it was dark, nobody watching, I got on my knees, humbled myself. I don't know what I said. Something about Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith. But this powerful feeling went through me, somewhere beyond the tip of my head to beyond the tip of my toes. Get in the water. Get baptized. Don't worry about the doctrine. Don't dispute it. And I knew where it was coming from. And the next day, the missionaries came back, and I said, well, boys, it looks like I got to get baptized, and you're the ones to do it. And they nearly fell over backwards. I said, oh, yeah, you've got to know a few things. You've got to come to church, not just a simple dunking, and that's it. We pay tithing. That's no problem. I already had a testimony of tithing before I joined the church. I realized the money, by this time I was on single parent benefits, and I knew the money, I wasn't earning it. It was coming to me, and I did my best to use it for my mother's sake or charity or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had a testimony of tithing before I even saw the Mormons. And tithing's no problem. Fasting once a month, well, that's no problem. I was ready. So they took me to church.
Fantastic.
It was just a dance hall they used at the time. There's about 20 members, including kids. And I thought, this is not, what's so special about these guys? They just look like an ordinary bunch of people singing the same sort of Christian hymns and same sort of Bible stories. But it seems like I've got to be with them. So I got baptized in the river, and the branch president, David Wigglesworth, said, well, we'll see you in church next Sunday, won't we? I think it was a Monday. So, oh, no, it's 6 days away. Anything could happen. As it was, my son wanted to go to Melbourne. Oh, got it.
We're recording now. I'm not going to miss anything now.
All right.
Okay, so
we're recording now.
We were just talking about your first day at church, Oleg, in Horsham.
Oh, by the way, I was looking through my memorabilia. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
There's a picture of that man in the middle with the whiskers?
Yeah, that's you, huh?
That was me, and the little band that started up that Buddhist monastery community center.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for showing us that. That's very interesting. Okay, let's just take off again from your first day at church in Horsham. You were baptized on a Monday?
Yes.
Church was on the following Sunday.
The following Sunday, I hitched off to Melbourne with my boy. I had an interesting experience with a friend and a glass of wine. She offered me a glass of wine, and I took it and didn't feel very good about it. I looked at it and realized that I'd made some sort of commitment about alcohol, and I took a sip and didn't feel very good at all. So when she wasn't looking, I tossed the wine away into the grass. And anyway, we came back to Horsham, and the following Sunday came up, and it seemed I had to go to church.
Oh, so you actually missed the first Sunday?
Yes. We were away at my friend's place in Melbourne.
Okay.
With that glass of wine.
Okay.
On a Sunday.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you repented and went to church the following Sunday.
So the following Sunday, I went to church in that old dance hall, and I stepped in the doorway, and they were clearing up the beer bottles and the cigarette butts from the previous night's shenanigans, and one of the ladies looked up and saw me come in and smiled, welcome smile. And again, this sort of like that experience I had with my first prayer and testimony, this powerful feeling went through me beyond the tip of my head to beyond the tip of my toes, and it said, "You're home. You're home." And I've never looked back.
Yeah.
Never looked back.
That's a good feeling. That's a good feeling.
Yes, it was.
I can relate to that, yeah.
And it took me about a year before I bought my first white shirt. I mean, Nobody pushed me. Nobody egged me on or tried to convert me, tried to influence me in any way. As I said, a year before I bought my first white shirt, and one day Bob Lyons, who you know, came to take me home teaching, and I was there, and came out in my thongs and flapping shirt tails, and he cleared his throat and said, "Look, Oleg, when we go out home teaching, we actually represent the Lord, and we should make an effort to be presentable and not sort of controversial in any way." Okay, I said. So one of the sisters had bought me she had bought me a pair of patent blue leather shoes, very stiff, very hard, very uncomfortable. But I put them on, and off we went. And I was teachable. I was ready.
Yeah.
I was ready for everything.
Yeah. You were about 36 or 37 years old at this stage, Oleg.
Yeah. And when time came to be ordained to the priesthood, I had to go to Heidelberg Stake Center for that. Yeah. The stake president was Ted Anderson.
Yeah.
And I turned up early, and nobody was there, but except the custodian, and he showed me around the place. And we got to the high priest room, not the high priest, the high councils. Probably. Anyway, they had all the pictures of the prophets were on the wall, all the past presidents of the church.
Yeah.
And he put his arm around me, and he said, "See there? That's where the whisker stopped." So I got the hint. I got the hint. I shaved them off when I went to the dedication of the Sydney Temple.
Okay.
That's when they came off.
Yeah, that was in what, 2000, I think.
That was Sydney. Oh, no. That was 84.
Oh yes, you're right. Yeah, 84, 85. Yeah. Okay, so
Hinckley came to.
Tell me about how your life has changed. Do you think? I mean, from the path you're on, which was not a bad path, really. You're a single father. You're looking after your son, and you had good morals. You were not following a really bad path, but you became a member of the church. So how do you think your life has changed because of your membership in the church?
Well, it's given me purpose. It's given me a direction. That straight and narrow way is certainly a direction. And as it came to me one day in Horsham, why is it straight and why is it narrow? Because you know exactly where you're going. And if you veer off, you know you're off the track. And you know where it is. You know how to get back on it. Very simple. And it's got that destination, that light at the end of the worldly tunnel can get pretty dark.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Something about. Oh, never mind. Yes. Well, as I said before, I know where I've come from. I know where I'm going, and I know why I'm here. And there's so much, and even with the temple work. 6 months before my wife died, Bridget died, I had a vision of her in a dream. And I didn't understand it until after she died. I realized it was a picture of her in an afterlife.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting because she was in a place very comfortable, all mod cons, everything that she ever wanted, on the apartment overlooking a beach. But she was alone, on her own, and accepting that. She had a smile on her, a bit like the Mona Lisa. She knew where she was, and she knew why she was there, and okay. And then when I joined the church, I realized she was waiting for her work to be done. And this was before she died. I saw that. I had this vision.
Yeah.
And it kept making more sense as I went on. Yeah.
Okay. So I gather you've completed her temple work.
Oh yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's done. My 4 generations have been done, but since I've done that, I've learned that my mother, all that my mother told me was not true. There was a lot of it's fairy tale. So my niece and her husband have been trying very hard to come up with some family history, and they've actually managed to dig up Mum's criminal record with the Soviet authorities, with the KGB.
Oh, really?
She was pardoned. There was a blanket pardon of all those political prisoners back in 1990 when the wall came down. But it gave us some names which I'd never heard of before.
Yeah.
So there's more questions than answers.
Yeah.
Still don't know where we are with my family. Oh, it's an alarm. I've got an alarm set for 9 o'clock to give the cat a pill.
I think something that you said I'd like to reflect back on. You talked about the straight and narrow path.
Yes.
So we have this straight and narrow path leading to eternal life.
Yes.
But the way that the word straight is spelt in the scriptures is S-T-R-A-I-T, straight, as in a strait of water. And so the path to eternal life is not necessarily smooth sailing. Oftentimes that path has its ups and downs and twists and turns.
Sure has.
And so, being a member of the church doesn't necessarily mean that life will be a bed of roses for you, does it, Oleg?
No. My late wife, we had a wonderful marriage and loving relationship, and 20 months of bliss, and she suddenly died. And that was quite tragic. And there again, at the funeral, I understood the meaning of the word comforter, the Holy Ghost, the comforter.
Yeah.
Not just a revelator, but a comforter as well.
Yeah.
And people that don't have the faith, don't have that spiritual appreciation, don't understand that.
Yeah.
There is much. All those pioneers. If you look into the church history, so many people. I've read that between Nauvoo and on the Mississippi and Salt Lake City, there's about 6,000 unmarked graves of the saints that didn't make it.
Really.
An awful lot of tragedy happened there, but those people pushed on, and they knew what they were doing, and they knew what they were sacrificing.
Yeah.
And it was all worth it.
That's right. That's right.
Amazing. It was worth it.
Yeah.
Anything was worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oleg, what you've proved to me today is that everyone has a story. Everyone has a story to tell. But before we close off, I'd like just to give you the opportunity to bear your testimony to us, if that's okay.
Bear my testimony. Well, that's as I think I mentioned already, I know that I'm a child of God. I'm much loved, a precious being, and we're all unique, and we're all of us, in our own way, gifted and precious, like we're like the facets of a huge diamond. We all shine off with our own gifts, skills, and talents, and all precious to each other. And Jesus is the center of the whole thing. Jesus Christ. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have that light shining from. And I guess it takes faith and an application of that faith to bring that light out and let it shine. Yes. Well, simply, God the Father is our Father, and Jesus Christ is our Savior, our older brother, our spiritual Father, and there's the Holy Ghost that's in us and around us and guiding us, comforting us when the need requires. Yeah. But it needs that application of faith to access all these wonderful things. And we're all brothers and sisters, the whole world. There's yeah. I got upset with a minister once. There was an interfaith meeting, and I said, well, what about you see all these people that hold the faith, they're blessed and they're saved. What about those people that didn't know about God or had another faith or ignorant of the Savior? Oh well, they're damned. And I got quite angry. He was dismissing all these billions of people.
Yeah.
And my brothers and sisters.
Yeah. Yeah. The restored gospel of Jesus Christ is all inclusive. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And I'm so grateful to have this knowledge and have this faith, and be able to share it with my family and beyond as well, not just here, but the temple work for all those people who didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's where it all fits in. Everything fits in the gospel of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Everything fits in. It all makes sense.
That's right. It does. Perfect sense.
But you've got to be in it to understand it. Yes.
It's the only way to really gain a full knowledge of the gospel of Jesus Christ is to live it, to accept it and live it.
Yes.
And
that's right.
Put in your best effort.
Yes.
You can't gain a purely intellectual knowledge of the gospel through reading a book or whatever. It has to be applied.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Has to be applied.
Yeah.
Anyway, Oleg, once again, it's been fantastic talking to you tonight, and I appreciate your story. There's so many similarities in your story and mine. Maybe we'll have to get you to interview me one day. But, there's some interesting overlap there. But thanks again for your time, Oleg. I'm sure your story will be a positive influence on others.
I hope so.
Your family will be able to.
If you have
hear
an
this
interesting story to tell, please contact us via our Instagram page or send an email
friends,
to gatherin@proton.me.
Thanks again for sharing it. We really appreciate it. And
You're welcome.
We'll be in touch again. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, Mary.